Thank you. Buonasera. Good evening. Having one accent in my language, in Somali language. I'm very excited and honored to be here with two such incredible guests, two people who carry on their shoulders many things that also concern my life. My name is Igiaba Scego. I'm an Italian Somali writer. I am a so-called second generation, a rather problematic sentence for me, second generation. And the three of us have in common that we are racialized people in a system still pervaded by systemic racism. And yes, one thing a lot in common is the family bond with Africa. Our parents are from Ghana, Liberia, and Somalia. But we are in some way American or African American in the case of Nana, Kwame, Adjei-Brenyah, and African Europeans in the case of me and Anna. Today, rather than talking about specific books, I would like to create a conversation between two parts of the world, the United States and Italy, a dialogue on Blackness, on the freedom to be what you want to be in this problematic environment. And I want to introduce a little bit our guests here, and Anna Maria Gehnyei, aka Karima 2G, is an Italian artist and writer of Liberian origin. As a singer, beatmaker, and music producer, she has performed on the console in the major Italian clubs and has several works and collaborations behind her. Starting with her solo debut, I'm so sorry, the album is 2G, 2G in Italian, and the producer is Sopa Music. Yeah, and thanks to her artistic career, John Cabot University recognized her with an international scholarship. And in 2020, she graduated in communication and political science. In her songs, she often addresses the theme of sexism and racism prevalent in Italian society, as well as the stereotypes that characterize the debate or so-called second generation. And this reflection stay all in her book, in her debut book, novel, memoir, published in 2023 by Fandango Libri, Il Corpo Nero, The Black Body. Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah is the New York Times best-selling writer of Black Friday, and Chain Gang All Star. The only son of Ghanaian immigrants, Adjei-Brenyah grew up in Spring Valley, a suburb of Rockland County in New York. Right after graduating from SUNY Albany in 2013, he pursued his MFA at Syracuse University, and his work was appeared in Paris Review, New York Times Book Review, Guernica, and so on. The last novel is Chain Gang All Star. In Italian, you find there Catene di Glorias, meaning chain of glory in a way, published by Sur for the New York Times among the 10 best books of the year. So congratulations for that. And and
Grazie.
oops. And now, yeah, we start our conversation. And I'm so curious because I'm another generation from you. I'm old. I'm the old lady here. So I try to understand some about my life through your young life. So it's wonderful. And I was very struck by one of your stories, Nana, contained in the Black Friday collection that talk about the level of blackness, the layers of our voice, And while reading, I think all the time how much it costs us as Black people to navigate the spaces that have been built by white systemic racism. How the protagonist of the stories try to lower his level of blackness over the phone with the code dress. And when I'm reading, I say, oh my God, I did the same. This is something really scare me, because sometimes you stay in a place, you say, oh my god, I stay in a wide environment, maybe you don't know, but you change your voice, you change your act.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you both, what was it like navigating the American or Italian culture industry in white spaces where your body was at best, black body of course, tolerated rather than accepted? How did you manage to become artists in this kind of frame? It seems of course obvious question, but it's not so obvious. Thank you.
No, it's a great question. And first off, grazie mille to all y'all for coming here and for y'all for sharing this
Yeah.
stage. I didn't know you made music too. That's so dope. Me too. So we'll talk about it later. Um, yeah, I think that the navigating of the self in the
Yeah.
white spaces or really any spaces is something that almost every black person in the world
Yeah.
has to like have some experience with. And it's funny because for me, growing up, I was born in Queens, New York. I went to a place called Spring Valley, Rockland County, for like high school, which is a suburb of New York City. But I didn't feel like a physical minority until I got to college, and still, everyone, my only the white people we had were like the teachers. I think I had 10 white people in my graduating class of 300, but still somehow all of us collectively knew that some version of ourselves was unacceptable in certain spaces. That is, like, say when you want to go on a like a job interview, hey, hi there, how you doing today? Like all of a sudden you like turn your voice like this. You dress a certain kind of way, and I think it's really important it's important to see that, because I think some people do that for so long, that erasure of self so consistently, that it becomes a permanent erasure because they never really interrogate it. And I think that I was forced, when I finally did have to feel like a true minority in college, to recognize, okay, do I think it's worth it to pretend to be this other person to get what I want? And to me, eventually, it just felt too. It started to get painful, and I didn't want to pretend. And nowadays, I've just gotten lucky that, because of the shield of what people might identify as like success, I think about it. I try my best to be exactly myself all the time, but it's something that's really important, because to make art, you have to have an understanding, at least a willingness to interrogate yourself in reality. But if you do that erasure too much, you sort of lose that ability.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the case of Italy. I was being the black girl everywhere, in school. Even like if you want to go to a club, I was the only black girl. I'm lucky because I have a twin sister, so we were two. But like in terms of like raising the voice or having the voice to lower your voice because kinds of create a sort of insecurity in you because you're black and you always have. There's something also that I used to do is saying sorry all the time to apologize, even though I haven't done anything. And so when you realize that that kind of create a limit in you, and that doesn't allow you to do anything, because how can you express yourself, how can you even do a job interview if you're afraid of your own blackness? So when I realized, I was like, I really need to step out of this so intense or comfort zone, because as you said, it might also create a comfort zone where you get used to it and there's nothing else to do.
Yeah, but I'm interested in the industry too, because for example, when I became a writer here in Italy, we are so few black people, and even we still are few black people in the Italian environment, in the publishing world, and it's not easy sometimes to enter in this in the industry. So I want to understand your process inside the industry and the problem that you face, and the problem and the experience of the other people before us. Sometimes it's so useful, and if you find some help, for example, some advice.
Yeah, and I'm still navigating how to deal with like the overwhelming whiteness of publishing at large. And I'm speaking more from the American context, I guess, but it's something you think about generally. Um, I was lucky that when I was starting to write itself, I was very ignorant about the reality of publishing, like the actual industry side. So I was really, really rooted in the craft part. But because of the type of things I write, once I started to try to go out with my book, it became really apparent to me that some of my subjects would be unacceptable to certain type of perspectives. And I remember in the beginning, I was like, well, maybe you have to get an agent first, for example. In America, it's almost impossible to get a black agent, meaning the person who would give your book to the publishing company. It's almost impossible for that person to be a black person. And that already creates a certain kind of challenge because a lot of my stories, they dealt with blackness directly. I also believe that they deal with humanity, but through that lens, sometimes it's hard for people to break through that initial layer. But I think I got lucky that I focused on the craft and just hoped and maybe ignorantly just believed. I was also very desperate. Like when I was first coming into the industry, my father was sick with cancer, and I had this idea that I was going to like save the family and everyone by being a successful author, which is a very ridiculous idea, like to financially save anyone by doing book stuff. But I had that idea. And because of that, like sort of desperateness, I was extremely unwilling to change anything because it had to be exactly as it was. And I got lucky that my agent didn't ask me to change anything. And I also think I got lucky in terms of timing. This is 2016, 2017, right before like the movie Get Out in America came out. Yeah, I think that, for lack of a better term, like being black was like in a certain type of black, and being black and like having an African name was like even better. Like look at him, he's like very African. And so I think that I think I sort of used that to my advantage, and then once I was in, I was like, well, I'm already here, so you can't change me now.
Yeah.
And you not only publishing world, but more music. So I'm interested about
Yeah, I was
music
thinking
too.
about
Yeah.
that too, right? So I remember when I started my music career, thanks to my first journey in Africa. So when I came back, I really felt this anger because I realized that there was no space for Black women. So not only Black, but also especially Black women, which were mostly objectified. So that anger basically got me to create my music. And immediately, I had some friend of mine were like, "You really need to publish this album," which I basically worked in 2 weeks in the studio, like myself in the studio.
In 2 weeks, you did the
In two
album, the whole
weeks,
album.
yeah, it's the whole album. I was so angry that that I produced a lot of music, and my friend were like, "You really need to release this album." And so I find myself in the media, like, many journalists talk about this album. And the way I was described as the angry Black girl, as the angry Black Italian rapper, you know. And I was not doing rap. I was doing different kind of music. But I don't know, in Italy, if you
Yeah.
are Black, you're either like a dancer or a rapper. There's nothing different from that. But I was doing grime, which is from the UK, and with an African element. I still believe that music changed my life. With my book, what I'm realizing right now is that, especially the new generation, so I'm talking about the third Black Italian generation, I like, thank you because you had courage, a lot of courage. And this concept of courage makes me think a lot, because it requires a lot of courage to share your story and to just be there and kind of have also a voice for the others who have never been seen before.
Thank you. We have something in common with three. We have Africa. Africa, of course, is not a country. It's 54 countries. It's a continent, but the people still are the villages over there. But Africa is a big issue for us. It's not something far. It's not only for our brothers, African American, is the ancestor, the middle passage. But for us, it's a family relationship, mother, fathers. And I want to understand what's meaning Africa for you, for your life, of course. And I'm so sorry, but it is a big, big question, I know, and to be or not to be. But I think for us, it's something deep inside in our art. For me, Africa is really important because I understand this courage came from Africa more than for me, for my experience. But I want to understand your experience.
Me first? Okay.
Okay.
Um, the idea of courage is really important, and also just being vigilant. I was thinking about your previous question. I'm going to answer the Africa one too, but like how even unconsciously you might inherit a kind of like not fear, but oh, maybe I won't do this because it will be perceived wrong. And I have a specific example. I'm like laughing at myself because when I was getting ready today, I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna wear or whatever. But I had like these I'm wearing these rings, but I had like a big ass ring. And then I was like, I don't know how Italians are gonna take it. So I took it off. And now I'm like kicking myself for not wearing it. Cause I'm like, look at y'all's. And but I did that's like a version of it, like a small, like little shrinking I did just because I was like, I don't even know. It wasn't even so anyways. So now I'm thinking about that and like I'll make a note to myself, like, don't do that again, regardless. But I had like a little, like maybe I'm like OD, like doing in America we say New York slang, ODing. That's like overdoing it, doing too much. That's some New York slang for you guys, Italy, New York lingo. But I had that thought. Anyways, Africa. Um, my parents are Ghanaian. They're both Ghanaian, and so I think right away, from the beginning, I had a sense of both feeling grounded in something, but dislocated from something as well. So because I hadn't gone there until I was older, I knew that it was like a barrier between myself and my parents, which kind of gave me a mode of code switching even before I met whiteness. Actually, there was like I'm an American, they're African, and like how do you fuse those two? And realizing sort of the multiplicity of my person, I think Africa like was like birthed that, made me realize, oh, like there's a lot of pieces of me in one. I think also just literally Ghanaians, they're a lot. There is like a confidence sort of in this, like there's the colors are loud. There's sort of a proudness, there's a pride like inherent to the just like the being. And also there's like a sort of a tradition of my first stories were given to me orally. Like I really got like Ashanti, my dad's Ashanti, my mother's Fanti. I really got Anansi stories as a kid. And so I think it's hard for me to tell where like the African begins and ends because it's just like the air I was breathing growing up. But I feel as though it colors sort of just the way I move through the world in terms of a personal like belief in myself, but also I know it's where I first got stories, and I think that's important probably too. There's probably way more, but I know we only have so much time.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Italy as a black girl, you always ask yourself, like, who am I? Where am I going? And what am I going to do with my heritage? I mean, I always ask this question, especially because my father grew me up with knowing the importance of the African culture, the history, something that you don't actually find in school, in Italian school. So my question was also like, why do I, we don't learn this in school, you know, where the one, there's no professors or who teaches you like the African continent, which, as you said, is not village, it's not, it's a continent. And by asking myself this all the time can also kind of create me a mental conflict, like psychological conflict, because you know that you're divided in two cultures. Like you have the African culture on one side and the Italian culture on the other side. And especially when I was younger, I felt in between, and kind of even the politics here in Italy, due due to the citizenship law, it seems that they want you to choose, you know, if you either want to be on one side on the other side, or sometimes you also hate. I had like a feeling of hating Africa sometimes, you know. But now I find the balance because thanks to my journey in Africa, which you just are someone, you just be yourself. And what I learned from my grandmother, from my ancestors, is like you can be both, but just be you, essentially.
BU is important, yeah, and is yeah, it's at the base of our identity. But I think about slavery, and in your novel Chingang or Star, because I fixed in my mind. I'm so sorry. The title in Italian, "The Catene di Gloria," and
It's okay. We're in Italy.
you find I find a lot of activism. For example, in all your writing, you speak about Angela Davis, for example, and this is interesting for me because when I was young, because I'm not young now, but when I was young,
this.
yeah, I'm not stop it. But when I was young, I remember that as African European, as Afro Italian, so Somali Italian, I try to understand myself, to look to US, and above all to Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X, and these three saints for me, because I understand my identity from African American. And then after I understand that, okay, we have another story, because it's not simple to understand that,
Yeah.
because you learn a lot about US, and then when around 20, 30 years old, and you understand your identity as African European. So I want to ask you both, for example, for you, what's the meaning for you, the activism these people came before us, this human rights ancestor in a way. And for you, Anna, I want to understand, this gap that we have as Afro-European, because of course we are this big influence from US, but we need to create our ancestor in a way, our influence, our Afro-European voice. So I want to understand this situation about activism and identity.
It's again a really important question, I think, because yeah, as you cited in all my books, there's been like some type of activist presence, and I didn't realize that until like more recently. I was like, am I doing this too much? But I think it's important because it's important for me to represent the reality, which is whenever people are being oppressed, no matter how dire the circumstances, no matter how seemingly insurmountable the odds, people are fighting back. Always. That's just the reality. And that's very important for me because it gives me power. It makes me feel as though I have a lot of strength, which goes into the question of activism and feeling like connected to these people, whether it's Angela Davis, Ruth Wilson Gilmore, a guy like Albert Woodfox, who spent, I think, 47 years in solitary confinement in America. I don't have the luxury to be like, oh no, it's too hard. Let me just go to sleep. It's whatever. There's people who are in much. He was an activist his entire life, 47 years in solitary confinement. I'm in Italy drinking sparkly water. I can't be like, it's too hard, it's too much. that's I think it gives me power to know that people in much more difficult circumstances put a lot on the line to give me access to the privileges I have right now. Um, that feels like a piece of it. I think as a writer, I am interested in speaking to the people's capacity to grow compassionate moral ethic. Whether I used to be almost like feel like that wasn't cool or something. I try to like hide that self. Some quote unquote literary writers, you almost try to like say you're not trying to do anything. You're just no, I care about that. And to me, activism is love in the physical, like your physical life. It's love motivating your physical actions in the world. And so it feels very close to my writing. It feels very close to my person. And I think about when I see the people who came before me in that context, they gave me a sort of paradigm through which to see the world and therefore myself. And it speaks to, again, to the previous question, which was sort of about that confidence, doing the work of discovering yourself, being and having to discover yourself because of the context you live in as a Black person, really anywhere, but a Black person who's like almost doubly removed by being also in whether it's Europe or America. You're going to be forced to have to ask that question: who am I? Where do I fit into this? And it's going to cause a lot of like strife and hardship. But on the other side of that journey, you stand up a little bit taller because you've asked and really you haven't taken for granted that you are someone. And so to me, that again sort of motivates, empowers this other thing, this activism thing, because once you have that good sense of self, you can understand, oh wait, who I am and who this other person is, we're both kind of being pressed down or oppressed by different systemic issues. And so to me, it's sort of to discover yourself and to grow into activism feel like symbiotic processes to each other.
Thank you. I mean, I just, it was like 3 years ago, I think 4 years ago, it's my niece who makes me think about, who told me actually, Auntie, you are an activist. I was like, no, I'm not. And,
In a way, you are.
yes, but I used to refuse the fact that I was an activist because it was like, I'm just doing what I feel I'm doing, like everyone should do, basically, you know. Do something for the community, for your brothers and sisters. And it's my niece who makes me think about that, because she went in school. Our teacher asked our students, who is the most present, like the inspiring person, the person that inspires you most. And she said, my auntie, because she's an activist. I was like, do you really say that?
I loved it though.
Well, I actually. Well, and each time I talk about my niece, I cry anyway, because she really gave me a lot of satisfaction. Yeah, and it's okay.
We're on the couch. It's fine.
It's fine. Red couch.
It's like we're like in group therapy.
So I'm psychologist. I'm not a writer here.
No, but just I
I'm just joking about
yeah.
that. Yeah.
The
Just
fact
fun.
that okay, so she makes me think about that.
Yeah, of course.
And so I accept the fact that I'm an activist, but also I thought about the fact that I grew up being an activist because my parents saved a lot of refugees' lives. And when you have to face issues like document all the time, you're forced to be an activist somehow. You are an activist. And when you also have to ask yourself all the time why I'm Black, and the reason why I I have to, you always have to relate with the white supremacy, and so you basically forced to be an activist. Going also back to the question of like how the Afro-European should
To
do.
create our voices here.
Well, I create my own voice by I've also been inspired by writers like Angela Davis, Toni Morrison, but mostly I've been inspired by musicians such as the Public Enemy and yeah, the Roots. And the Roots especially really helped me a lot in the United States. They really promote my album, and they were also, what I realized is that
Wait, what? That's very cool. You said it's so calm.
Well, true.
Does everybody know the roots? They're like a big deal. It's okay. They get it. Good. I'm just
So because
checking.
they had this platform called OK Africa,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I know it. Yeah.
So I remember when my album was released, so like there's a young lady in Italy and that was doing Berlusconi or political campaign and so on. So I was also interested in seeing how the United States was watching Italy during that time in relation also to the black community, and that is how I also thought about the fact that maybe differently, actually not maybe differently from Italy, black people in the United States really when they know the right, something that we don't, not yet. No. So I also learned from one of my African American friends. Yes, she was from Los Angeles. She was the one who really pushed me a lot, and she said, "Karima, you represent a generation. You represent the first generation of immigrant child. So you represent history, and the fact that you represent a history that makes you important. I think the second generation in Italy should really like think about this.
It's true because we are history
Yeah.
always, and above all here. And when you speak, I think in politics. Do you believe in politics? Because sometimes, as a black people, no, because we did this conversation before. I have these feelings that the politics, in general, politicians, even with our skin, not only white people, but in general, speak about us, not with us. So this is my feeling, and we are, the theme, the subject of the conversation, but we aren't inside the conversation. And with literature and with music, we create this conversation with the community and communities, because as a black people, there are many communities, east, west, North Africa. So we are several communities. But what do you think about, politics in general and black, the relationship?
Like everyone knows that, and you
Because,
said,
sorry,
yeah,
above
thank you.
all for the second generation issue here in Italy, because when you arrive in 18 years old, when you get this 18 years old, you became a foreigner in your own country without passport. This is different in United States, of course, but there are other problems in United States. George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor. So, we are, in a way, we are foreign in our own land. So I want to understand this relation for you inside your art, above all.
Yeah, that is what I was going to say. Is that okay? So you have to reach the 18 years, the legal age, 18 years old before you can apply for the citizenship, and who knows when you're gonna get it, right? So in my case, I remember I waited like a lot for that, and this when you I remember that I was like, the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna vote. I can't wait. I would really, because listening also to my peers, they were like, oh, I'm voting this party, I'm voting this political party. So I was actually waiting for that. But as soon as I get my citizenship, since then I never vote, because it sounds weird, like um I feel, and there are some second generation people who knows about that in the last years especially, there are artists who decided to join some political parties because of their campaign, like, I promise you that things are gonna change for you. I think you don't really need to join a party in order to have your voice. And that was the biggest mistake that the second generation made. In fact, we didn't had no result. I think you can raise your voice by writing, by doing music. Actually, I feel that the writing is even more powerful than music, based on my personal experience. So
Right? Literature is more power.
yes,
Okay, why?
definitely.
So I'm curious to understand that.
Yeah, I'm curious why as well.
I don't know. In the case of Italy, I've been presenting my book in different schools, and even there's only maybe one, two black students. And it's not only about, black versus white. No, I'm not talking about that. But the fact that there's a young generation who are not black, who are willing to change the life of the second generation. Like, what can we do? It's not only their problem; it's also our problem. And by reading my biography, like, my book, they're like, oh, thank you, I never knew about the second generation and all the things that you have to face. Now I have a friend, she's second generation like you. I really need to know about her more. So they're more interested into knowing, not only about Africa, but like things that happening around them in Italy.
I'm really interested in that like idea because I think maybe because I'm a writer first, I'm doing music now. I feel like both ways about it, but music is really interesting and powerful. And I'll answer the political question as well too. That because it can spread like that. Music can spread, and you even talked about how Public Enemy can change you all the like way far away, pretty quickly. Like you can make a song today, and it could be all over the world tomorrow, and that's really powerful. That's an important power of music. And I'm also interested in how music can almost skip your brain and change you. I think of it as like a main line, which is maybe a graphic image, but like straight into the veins. Um, Literature has to go through your brain to get to your heart, and some people in today's temperament aren't trained to open their brain up to anything for more than 10 seconds. So I think it kind of depends on like the context and who you are, but there is something obviously for me I've been talking about it all through today because I'm like right now feeling pretty moved. Like I from where I'm from, I can't it's hard for me to describe how unlikely it is for me to be sitting here right now. Sometimes I don't even want to say it's real. It almost feels like a dream. And to think I did that because I wrote some book that I was just working on in my room over the last 7 years, something I imagined. She said this and then she said that. And then all of a sudden, now I'm really in Italy. And people of Italian descent who don't even speak the same language as me are telling someone else that their hearts have been changed. So I think it's really powerful. I think all of it is extremely powerful. And I think it also what I also think about is how does it change us in making it too. I think that's also like something I'm interested in because I know making music, even though I'm very early in that process, kind of hits something that writing can't hit exactly for me, and just in the making of it. And then I could say more about how music is very co-opted by capitalism in this interesting way, but then so is the book and blah blah blah, whatever.
It's everything in a way.
Yeah, it's
I said,
everything.
but it's yeah,
But like
market and
it's everywhere. But were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was thinking about when I signed contract with my publisher. So I remember my publisher director was sitting down. I was like, I was basically signing, and I asked her, "Am I the first Black Italian writer in your publisher?" She's like, "Oh yes."
She said, "Of course."
No, no, but she also never thought about it. You really didn't realize until that moment.
this is
Yeah.
That says everything.
And then to your other question with the political piece, I think that like traditional, like governmental politics, I guess is what you're talking about. I think that for me, that is an avenue through. It's like there's always a lane. Like someone has to attack the government politics side, and so and even with the activism thing, I think it's interesting because I also resist to call myself an activist, even though outside of writing, I work with the advocacy group called the Rockland Coalition to End the New Jim Crow. We do things regarding like prisons and um, inequity in the school district that I'm from. But I still hesitate to call myself that because it feels like it feels too big. And also it feels like, I don't know, too much pressures on you to like fix something. But when in that group, we talk a lot about sometimes we advocate for like legislation to politicians, and that's cool. But sometimes you do a direct action, meaning sometimes you have to just shut shit down. Sorry for that. Like you have to just sometimes you have to just put your body in the road and make sure they can't pass. So and those are different avenues, and they're all useful. I think the problem with government politics, or the idea that government politics is the only way to meaningfully change anything, it gives way, way, way too much power to people that are not us. If you think that voting is the only way to change the world, it gives way too much power to the system, which is already inherently oppressive, that didn't see us in the first place. And it actually empowers the oppressor to think that only appealing to their methods can, that's the only way to reach salvation. So to me, it's worth it because there's utility in that space, just practical utility. Like if I can work with some legislator and now they make solitary confinement illegal in New York State, that changes something. That decreases suffering. And to me, that is useful. But if you put all your faith in that, then you realize you have a lot of tools. They want you to think you only have these 5 over here, but you can use that one, but also you could use this hammer over there too, or whatever you want.
Yeah, it's difficult the question. And I know because we need politics next to us, but sometimes it's impossible, And in Italy, we have this problem of representation. No black people, no minority or racialized people inside the politics, inside the publisher, inside the university. We still, I know that in US we have a lot of problem, but here we are like US in 1950 in a way, so this is a big challenge for us. So sometimes I think, okay, I'm old, I'm 50 years old, and I say no, because this is for me because I began my career with the law of citizenship. I remember with other people of my generation, we went to do demonstration for this law, citizenship. We want to become Italian. We need passport because we raised or born here. So when you begin this fight when you was 25 and still in the fight, you became a little bit tired. So and this is the problem in Italy, because no one want really to change this environment, and there are many children outside there that they need or not only the passport, they need that the country say you are part of
You're
us.
one of us.
This is something really important. But another question is about dystopia, because I put here in my notes some words like video games, African futurism, horror, Hunger Games, Octavia Butler. No, because it's something that I find in common in your book, because you speak about the prison and put together prison, the system of prison in the United States, and the entertainment. And this is incredible, the gladiators, they still fight until death to get freedom from themselves. And this entertainment thing, when I am reading this book, I think in Anna, because Anna Maria always speak about this in simply conversation with me about entertainment, this and African futurism, but the hard to be black in this environment, and both of you use the frame of dystopia, the real dystopia, because it's sometimes it's a hyper realistic novel is your novel, and hyper realistic experience your experience. So I want to understand with you what's the meaning of dystopia. Why do you use dystopia to explain the reality of prison and the reality of entertainment?
Dystopia is a word that I think about a lot because of this context. But before that, you really, if you wouldn't have told me you're 35, I would have believed you. Wow. I 100% in my head was like, she's like 36. I don't know why she keeps saying she's old. Wow.
Okay. The Somali skin,
For real. Very.
Yeah.
But dystopia.
I'm a dystopia. Yeah.
When I think of the word dystopia, and I always play around with it because I usually ask, like sometimes students will ask me this, and I ask them, what do you mean by dystopia? And to me, dystopia is any world where there is unnecessary suffering in mass administered by like a powerful entity or controlling power. And under that definition, I don't know how we can't be in dystopia right now. To me, dystopia is like a point of view. To me, dystopia is based on how close or far you are from some type of privilege. And even for all of us, if 10 years ago I wrote a book about disease that meant we would have to go to school on screens, it's a dystopic novel. For someone who has nothing to do with a conflict, but United States sponsored missiles are blowing up their house, it's a dystopia. Depending on your perspective, depending on where you're at, there's a lot of suffering that's unnecessary and it's being administered always. So for me, I think that a lot of my job is to remove some of the veneer, the veil that might exist. So the carceral state in prisons, there's a veil which is it's opaque to us, meaning we don't very often see inside the day-to-day to the prison. I think if we thought very closely about the fact that prisons take human beings, they are kidnapped from communities, put in cages where they may be killed systematically by the government, where they may be sexually assaulted. If we think about the fact that most women in prison are victims of sexual assault, if we think about the reality that most people in prison suffer from mental health crises or poverty or disease of addiction, I really like to orientate myself in a far future where they look at this as like a second dark age. And from that point of view, it's a dystopia, from that point of view where like we look at whoever, I think about, sorry, I'm running on, but we think about humane ways of killing people, right? At one point, they might have, not in America, but in France, they might take a horse and put it on each of your sides and quarter you. And then we're like, oh my God, that's so inhumane. And then maybe they bring a guillotine because it's like more humane than the horse. Like we used to kill people with horses. Now we have this system called the guillotine. It's like, that's so kind. And then that becomes inhumane. Then they have, oh, well, now you know what? We have this firing squad. We'll just shoot you in the face. And it's like, then that becomes so humane. And then we have another system. Then we have the electric chair. And now the electric chair is inhumane. And now, so we have lethal injection in America, I'm talking about, where some countries don't even want to sell us the things because lethal injection seems very like safe or humane because you don't move. But really, it's 4 chemicals that do the lethal injection. One of them paralyzes you. So a lot of people are suffering, but they are just paralyzed through it. What I'm trying to say is that there's all these super inhumane things, but we keep trying to change like the flavor, not the paradigm. And so basically I'm saying, I think that dystopia is right now, but also it's okay, there's good stuff too. But I really do think that dystopia is right now, in my understanding, which is that there's a lot of unnecessary suffering that is being administered by the most powerful forces that exist. And even more so, the sadder part is that we are, if not just complicit, active participants. on that cheery note. But yeah, that's how I think about it.
Well, Olen, I got to know about dystopia like a few years ago when I attend the course at the
Because I
university.
remember when you
Yeah.
are African futurist, because when I met you for the first time, you are in that part of your life, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that was in 2017, I
17,
think.
yeah.
Because I was defined as Afrofuturist. It's like I never heard that word before, that term before. And so I started doing some research and I discovered Sunrise, I discovered like a lot of musicians or artists that were basically doing, creating a philosophy, a movement through their art and against segregation, against racism in the United States, and that was as you said before. I've seen some similarities with Italy nowadays, and I also wrote a thesis about that. So, but I realized that instead of me being aggressive, angry, basically, I was looking for something different, which was irony, like talking about these issues in a different way. And that is how basically people were able to listen, especially in Italy, which is a country that never hadn't faced the issue of colonialism. So when you talk about racism, it's difficult to accept that, and you have to talk about that maybe through music, through like my first Afrofuturist creative art was a comic book, so which I call the Italians, like the Italians, like the second generation, or aliens, So they were basically true tales, true story. And I remember the reaction of, people reading the comic book. They are like, okay, which is very funny because, for instance, I gave an example, I share a story about when I was waiting at the bus stop and there was our two police guy who came and was like, can you give us, show me your ID? It's like, did you ever stop a black girl, like a white girl at the bus stop? What are you doing here? Well, I'm waiting for the bus. So that makes you think a lot. And there was this police guy who told me, where there's a lot of girls like you around here. It's like, in which sense? You know? So I told the guy, well, I know my right. And just think about what you do, what you're doing. And the reaction was also interesting because the police guy told me, well, we're so used to this that we finally don't realize that we're so used to this that something that we have to also get rid of. And what gave me the power is the language for sure, or education. But I also think about those who don't gain power through that, So I don't know if that is if I answer to your question, but yeah.
No, thank you. And another question is about language, because language, English or Italian, language is our instrument of work in music, in literature. And I think in myself in a way, because in my last novel, I think in the Italian language that I used to write. And the Italian language is not natural because it's of course, it's the language of Dante, the language of literature, but it's the language of colonialism, the language that my grandfather, that used to work with under the fascism, with the fascists, use because my grandfather was a translator, interpreter, and he worked with fascists, and he used Italian to explain the words of colonialism, the code of colonialism. And the Italian came into the colony is aggressive, rules, rape, something really bad Italian, speaking Italian with imperative, with it's a colonial language, it's oppression. Oppression and for to create empire. So I use that language. And of course, I need to decolonize my language when I use it. And I discover a lot of things about Italian language. And I discover that sometimes it's difficult to put some idea of blackness into the Italian language. Sometimes you say, we talk about this. Sometimes the word doesn't exist in Italian language. For example, blackness translated with nerezza, but sometimes it's it's a challenge. It's a work to find the word to understand ourselves. So I want to understand for you what language do you use for your art, because it's not something easy. It's a process. For me, it's a big process, but I want to understand both of you.
Okay, in my case, during my music career, I used the pidgin English because what I realized, oops, sorry. Yeah. No, no, it's working, it's working. What I realized is that, is it working? Okay. The second generation sometimes, especially the African, no, it's not working. Sorry. I got three now. No, no, it's working now. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, something that I realized in the last years is that the second generation, the African Italian especially, they forget about the language of origin. In my case, the Liberian Pidgin English. They refuse basically to speak that language. So they're more into the dialect and even refusing the Italian language sometimes, you know. And I remember since I was a child, my mother was more like, you need to learn the Italian language more than they do. That is going to give you the power, basically, you know. And more than white people, yes. And in fact, that was the way by speaking the Italian language, using the conjunctive also. That was the way to basically respond to certain discrimination or certain situation. And I also, like at home, I speak pidgin English. And what and also the pidgin English also give you the power by going back home when you go back home. Because if it wasn't because of the pidgin English or the Liberian pidgin English, I don't know if actually my relatives were gonna totally accept me or welcome me. And that is a issue, a problem that many African Italians are facing. I received a lot of messages from people like, I wish I could speak the language. My parents didn't teach me the language. And now that I'm like 18 or 20 years old, I really want to learn the language and I don't know where to start from. Can you give me a suggestion? Or that could be another event for sure. But I also, in terms of immigration, there are some immigrant parents, no matter where they're from. They could be Romanian, they could be African, they could be Filipino as well. When they arrive to a different country like Italy, it seems that they have difficulties in teaching the children not only the language, their language of origin, but also the culture. Um, Maybe because they are afraid of doing that, or they prefer to grow up the child without having problem. Because in my case, I remember like when I was a child in school, the professor, the teachers look at the language as a problem. They're like, well, you have to only speak the Italian language and forget about the Liberian Pidgin English. So for the first time, I wrote a book in Italian because I felt the need of I'm an Italian as well, so I also feel the Italian language as my language. Yeah.
And sorry, and for you, of course, it's not more than colonialism. Colonialism, maybe is
Sorry, but I wanted to add something to
yeah, yeah,
this.
yeah,
So I
of
don't want
course.
to interrupt you. Uh, in Africa, there's some countries like Senegal. Now, I just read an article yesterday, Zimbabwe, who decided to use the language, like in Senegal, Wolof, as the national language and refuse the colonialistic language. I think that is very, yes, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, it is the same question. Basically, of course, is another perspective of language. Of course.
Yeah, I'm one of the people who don't have my parents' language and like I want to get it back now. I'm interested in that and also other languages as well. I think, especially like traveling more, being an author, it feels like just kind of lame to speak English so much. But I also see that how as an English speaker, I'm sort of coddled everywhere. Like except for France, they're not nice about it. But everywhere else, kind of like treats you really speaks English to kind of accommodate, and that's good. But I don't like that feeling of having to be accommodated to. Um, but that said, even though I only speak English, I don't speak truly my parents' language. I'm a Black American from New York, and so even right now, I'm speaking a kind of English I know you guys can understand. If it was like my friends back home, it'd be I think it'd be more or less imperceptible. I don't think you guys would understand it because it's very like there's just so many I don't even know how to describe it, but it's different. So that's like another language. And so some people call it like American, like Black African American vernacular English. I don't do that because that feels so academic. But um, including the way that I speak or some of my friends speak in my books was really important. And not hiding from that. And even though my book is literary, quote unquote, whatever that even means, I feel it's important to represent the way I speak normally. And so I'm really interested in that. I'm really interested in how language, because language, I think English is a good quote unquote language. Besides, it's obviously a language of imperialism, but it's very flexible. It's very bendable. It's been bent a lot by people by force, and you can have the extreme corporate war machine talk, which rather than saying human lives is like there's been 10 casualties, rather than like we shot a bomb and obliterated 10 human souls from this earth. I could say both of those things. And I think being really aware of the flexibility of the English language is really useful for dissecting propaganda and all this stuff that whatever you want to say.
Thank you so much because we finished the time, but we are here around for the people. So thank you so much. Big applause. Thank
Grazie
you.
mille.
Grazie.
Thank you, Igiaba.
Thank you, guys. Okay.
She doesn't love compliments, but please. Language as a passport. You make me feel